Chicago Fire Season 14 needs to finally address two mysteriously devastating character tragedies. Despite their frustrating lack of resolution, two major mysteries in Chicago Fire deserve answers in Season 14. The Chicago Fire Season 13 finale did little to establish its upcoming character exits, but other characters have been gone much longer without explanation. There is now an amazing possibility that Chicago Fire Season 14 can finally address that for better or worse. It's difficult because closing either mystery could require part-time additions to the Chicago Fire cast. One of the easier ways to answer unsolved questions in a TV show is to bring in new characters with extra information, but that actually might not be the play this time. In fact, both mysteries can be resolved by characters already in the cast. Nothing proved just how important it is to know how Stella's, Miranda Ray Mayo, parents died more than Chicago Fire Season 13. It was revealed by her cousin Cole, Richard Blackman, that Stella moved in with her Aunt Laverne and took over the house when Laverne fell into postpartum depression, which does a lot to explain Stella's rather humane approach to managing her truck staff. However, at no point has it been established why she had to move in with Laverne in the first place. We know that this happened after her parents died, but the cause of her parents' deaths has never once been said in the series, despite years of knowing that it happened. We only know how it shaped Stella's personality. By now it seems odd not to know any more than that. It's easy to find an entire timeline of Kid and Severide's Taylor Kinney Chicago Fire relationship, yet fans have to guess about Kid's parents while knowing almost nothing about them. This could be answered by new characters or flashbacks, but such gimmicks are perhaps best left for another mystery. Meanwhile, in Season 13, Episode 8, Lizzie Novak, Jocelyn Houdon, absolutely unloads on a man when she's called to the scene of an attempted suicide. Later in the episode, a former neighbor recognizes Lizzie as one of the Novak girls when she visits her childhood home. The overwhelming implication is that Lizzie has first-hand experience with suicide that the neighbors can easily remember. Novak also never elaborates on what happened to her family, so online fans have had to put some pieces together on their own. A prime theory is that Lizzie specifically asks her attempted suicide victim how he could do this to us because her father took his own life. But that's not the only credible theory worthy of further consideration. At the beginning of the episode, Lizzie kisses her finger and presses it to a photo of her sister. This has caused a lot of fans to assume that Lizzie's neighbor recognizes her because Lizzie's sister is locally remembered due to her suicide. Both stories are plausible explanations for one of Chicago Fire's biggest unanswered mysteries. On the face of things, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with backstory characters dying under known circumstances. The problem is that every reference to Kid's parents distracts from whatever she's presently talking about, even if it would otherwise be considered unrelated. The same is true of Novak's family history, especially assuming she'll likely be called to the scene of a suicide again. Novak can't be part of another suicide storyline without this coming up. Otherwise, her character development would be ruined. Likewise, Stella can only bring up her dead parents so many times before people start demanding explanations. Perhaps that hasn't happened yet, but fans need to know that Stella is more than a receptacle for unexplained melodrama. One of the biggest mysteries from Season 13 is how Chicago Fire might write out Carver, Jake Lockett, and Ritter, Daniel Keary. Characters like Kaylee, Caitlin Shennett, might become more important, but it seems that Ritter and Carver's leaving will create numerous opportunities to fill their roles in the firehouse. One member of the 51, however, can't take such a hands-off approach to controversy. Chicago Fire Season 14 will have to focus to some degree on Stella's pregnancy, which means that the sheer subject of family is going to be a big topic at the firehouse moving forward. This means that Stella may be reflecting on her own childhood to become more comfortable being a parent. And Stella won't be on that journey alone. Novak also has to come to grips with her past, whether it surrounds her father or sister. This could lead to Novak and Kid having a more intimate conversation with each other than ever before, allowing them to wrap up these mysteries while also building up the show's characters. While it's clear that Kid's pregnancy provides an opportunity for her and Novak to bond over these family tragedies, for over a decade, Chicago Fire has captivated viewers with its unflinching portrayal of bravery, sacrifice, and the tight-knit bonds forged in the heart of Firehouse 51. Through harrowing rescues and emotional personal arcs, fans have stood by their favorite firefighters and paramedics through every blaze and heartbreak. But as the series steams toward its next chapter, there are two glaring, mysteriously unresolved character tragedies that fans are still haunted by, and it's high time the show gives them the closure they deserve. 1. The disappearance of Scott Rice. A brother lost in the smoke, Scott Rice, played by Warren Christie, burst onto the Chicago Fire scene with swagger, charm, and a hidden vulnerability. An old friend of Severide's and a once promising firefighter, Rice brought baggage to Firehouse 51, specifically a history of walking away from fires. Although he claimed it was due to injury and fear for his son's future, his suspicious behavior nearly cost the team dearly. In Season 3, Rice vanished just as quickly as he arrived. After being exposed for his lack of reliability, he quietly exited the show, with little more than a few lines of dialogue to mark his departure. No dramatic farewell, no deeper dive into his psyche, just smoke and silence. It's jarring, especially considering Rice's potential. There was more to explore, the trauma behind his fear, his bond with Severide, and the sacrifices he made as a single father. Did he find redemption? Did he fall further from grace? Did Severide try to help him off screen? Or was their bond severed for good? In a universe like One Chicago, where even deceased characters are often remembered and honored, Rice's vanishing act feels like a strange omission. A mention from Severide, a file found during a case, or even an unexpected reappearance could bring meaning to his disappearance. Perhaps Rice was battling PTSD. Perhaps he ended up in a firehouse far away. Perhaps he never stopped watching over his old crew. Chicago Fire thrives on second chances and redemption arcs, and Scott Rice deserves both. 2. The unspoken grief of Leslie Shea. A death that still echoes. No tragedy on Chicago Fire struck deeper or more suddenly than the death of Leslie Shea. Played by the magnetic Lauren German, Shea's departure at the end of Season 2 and start of Season 3 broke hearts across the fandom. A beloved paramedic and Severide's best friend, Shea was smart, funny, and unapologetically herself, a character who stood for authenticity and strength. Her death, the result of a falling pipe during a rescue, felt abrupt, devastating, and cruel. It sent shockwaves through Firehouse 51, especially for Severide and Dawson, who were closest to her. The show did take time to grieve Shea, even naming Ambulance 61 in her honor. But then, the grief seemed to evaporate. Shea faded into the archives of Chicago Fire history, her memory rarely revisited. This silence is deafening. Because for viewers, Shea wasn't just a side character. She was foundational to the emotional depth of the show's early seasons. Her bond with Severide was a beautiful platonic anchor in a show so often dominated by romantic entanglements. Her presence pushed characters to grow, and her loss was supposed to be a turning point. But now, 12 seasons in, Shea's absence has become a lingering ghost. Severide never truly unpacked the depth of his grief. There were hints of it, sleepless nights, angry outbursts, quiet reflections. But then the story moved on. It's not that life doesn't continue after loss. It's that Chicago Fire, a show built on emotional authenticity, hasn't allowed Shay's memory to evolve with the characters who loved her. What if a new paramedic found Shay's old journal? What if a medical trainee turned out to be someone inspired by Shay's heroics? What if Severide found himself drawn back to the alley where she died, forced to face his pain once and for all? These storylines don't need to dominate a season, but Shay's legacy, her laughter, her loyalty, her courage, deserves more than occasional mentions. It deserves a reckoning that reveals how grief never truly disappears, only changes shape. Why these tragedies matter now more than ever. The heart of Chicago Fire lies not just in high-stakes rescues, but in emotional continuity. It's about how the past shapes the present, how losses, even years later, can reignite the fire within. With characters like Severide, Herman, and Mouch still holding the emotional DNA of the original crew, now is the time to confront those buried stories. The show has always been brave in the face of tragedy. It's time for that same bravery to apply to storytelling. Rice and Shay both represent unfinished chapters. Addressing their stories now would not only provide long overdue closure, but would deepen the current narrative arcs of characters like Severide, Bowden, and the next generation at Firehouse 51.